Olá a todos, soy el profesor Ricardo Brito y es un placer estar aquí con ustedes para este que es el último día de la Global Management Week 2023. Los temas de este año son Globalización Shift, discutida en el primer día, Climate Change, panel de ayer, y AI Impacts on Companies and Careers, tema de la discusión con expertos que sigues hoy. Recuerda, por favor, si no enviaste tu pregunta con anticipación, puede hacerlo a través del chat, ¿ok? La inscripción para participar de nuestro desafío de gestión ya está abierta. Reúne a tu grupo y participa en este desafío que cuenta con premios de más de $200,000 en becas para programas ejecutivos. La fecha límite de solicitud es el 6 de octubre, ¿ok? Para hoy contamos con 4 invitados especiales que hablarán sobre las transformaciones causadas por el avance de la inteligencia artificial en las empresas y cómo esto ha transformado los negocios y las carreras. Tenemos con nosotros al profesor Julian Espinosa de la California State University in Northridge. Thank you very much for being with us, Professor Julian. El profesor Julian es el fundador del podcast Papi Digital, cofundador de CISLE y profesor adjunto en California State University, Northridge. Estoy muy agradecido también por la presencia hoy con nosotros de la profesora Astrid Kiel, directora de programas de MBA en la University of La Habana, California. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for being with us, Professor Kiel. Professor Kiel tiene un doctorado en negocios y marketing y tiene una amplia experiencia docente de investigación en esta área. El profesor Ai Ren, de la State University of New York, también está con nosotros. Muchas gracias por su participación. Thank you very much for being with us, Professor Ai. El profesor Ai Ren es doctor en matemática y sus intereses en investigación se centran en las áreas de Machine Learning e IoT. Finalmente, tenemos con nosotros al profesor Terence Tse, PhD en Administración y profesor de la Hult International Business School de Londres. Professor Terence es cofundador y director ejecutivo de la Nexus Frontier Tech, empresa especializada en el desarrollo de inteligencia artificial. También es asesor de negocios y coautor de The AI Republic, Building the Nexus Between Humans and Intelligent Automation, un bestseller internacional en Amazon. Comencemos la charla de hoy con el profesor Ren, pero antes de hablar sobre aplicaciones prácticas de IA, cosas más complejas, voy a empezar con una pregunta muy básica acá. Professor Terence, how can we define artificial intelligence in the context of the recent wave of generative AI?
Hi, I would like to explain a few terminologies that is really hot and trendy right now. For example, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. Let's start with machine learning. So machine learning usually are more like providing projections, predictions when we feed a model or an algorithm some data. And the interesting thing is the more we feed them and the more capability that this algorithm can give us better estimation. Within the machine learning, actually, we have supervised machine learning and unsupervised machine learning. It depends on how much the expertise in this task involved in this algorithm design. So this machine learning is a subset like this. And within the machine learning, there's another subset that's called deep learning. In general, deep learning studies neural networks. And it provides conditional or unconditional relationship between the nodes, just like to study how our brain cell works. So we can tell machine learning is bigger and its subset includes deep learning. So actually the artificial intelligence is a bigger set that contains machine learning. And also it has some other components such as natural language processing. So for example, it is one of the functions that ChatGPT has. Another example is like image recognition. So we see those examples everywhere. So one of the famous examples is in the hospital. Doctors will use those kind of AI application or tool to help them as a second opinion to read X-ray images or MRI images. For example, a patient, do they have lung cancer or any shadow within the image? Those kind of AI tools can help them. Yes, this is part of artificial intelligence application. And you can see AI actually is the biggest site that includes all those components. So this leads to my preferred definition about artificial intelligence. Of course, there are many currently, different people have different suggestions or recommendations. But my preferred is artificial intelligence should be at least matching the capacity of a human being.
Thanks, Professor Ren. La IA es probablemente la innovación tecnológica más disruptiva de nuestra generación. Una tecnología en rápida evolución con un gran potencial de hacer que los trabajadores sean más productivos, las empresas más eficientes, estimular las innovaciones en nuevos productos, nuevos servicios y elevar los niveles de vida de las personas. Sin embargo, algunas personas entienden que la IA es esencialmente diferente en la naturaleza de todas las tecnologías que los humanos han creado hasta hoy. Mientras que los avances tecnológicos anteriores en automatización tendían a afectar las tareas rutinarias, la IA tiene el potencial de automatizar tareas no rutinarias. En vista de este problema, me gustaría preguntar al profesor Julian cómo él evalúa ese escenario. Hello again, Professor Julian. How do you evaluate this scenario? What kinds of risks and opportunities AI poses for companies and workers?
You know, I'm very bullish on AI. What it really comes down to is that this is a paradigm shift. I don't know if this is the biggest disruptor of our lifetime, within our lifetime, but it's definitely a disruptor and it's definitely a paradigm shift. I always like to look at history and look back and say, what happened in history and where is evidence that we can glean from this kind of information? So one of my favorite examples specifically is the automobile industry. At some point, we transported ourselves through horse and carriage, and horses moved us around. The fuel for the horse and the fuel for the transportation was hay. So when automobiles first hit the roads, well, we didn't even have roads, we just had dirt. When they hit for the first time, that created a big paradigm shift because we no longer needed horses. We didn't need carriages. So what industries did we no longer need? We didn't need people to tend to horses anymore. We didn't need the hay industry as much as we needed it back then. We didn't need people to clean up the droppings of the animals on the streets. There were so many different industries that were disrupted when horse and carriage were removed out of the ecosystem when it came to transportation. Now, the automobile industry, how many jobs did it create? How many new things did it do? So I think this is the same thing with AI. It is a paradigm shift. It is changing things. With the jobs being lost, there is new jobs. The question becomes, is there a delta? What is the delta? Is the delta greater or less, right? Are there more new jobs or are there less new jobs? So that all will be said. I think today where we are, and I like to live in practicality, is that AI is going to be probably replacing jobs, but it will also be adding jobs. You can't also use AI and completely remove the human out of it because it is not there yet. And I don't think it will, I don't know if it'll ever be there, but it needs humans. Without it, it's not as efficient.
All right, thank you, Professor Julian. And for you, Professor Terence, in the same context, what you recommend for companies and managers taking care of the risks involved in the AI application?
That is a very good question. The reasons why I say it's a very good question is simply where in my experience working with clients on AI, the first step they almost jump into is to figure out, okay, what are the things that, like, what are the business propositions we can actually use AI for to make the to make the highest return given the latest technologies. Now, it sounds rational with that, but there are two fundamental problems, which I think, are the wrong first steps, if you were to ask me. The first is one should never jump into the most complex technology straight away, because complex technologies is very, very difficult to implement, very, very difficult to actually get it working, especially when we're talking about putting it into an organizational setting. And the second thing, I think is important is that when it comes to thinking about what kind of results one can get from the process, is to think about how you can quantify the results. And therefore, our recommendations to the clients is that you should not actually use AI, especially when this is the first time, on growth, on improving your revenue. Instead, use AI for the purpose of cost cutting. Why? Simple, because you can measure cost savings a lot easier than the potential growth in revenue that you can make as a result of using AI. So I think these are the two most important first steps managers need to think about when it comes to taking on AI.
Excellent, Professor Tse. Thank you very much. Pero sabemos que as empresas estão adoptando a IA não só porque podem, sino porque necessitam. A IA pode afetar significativamente a competência, enfrentando a las empresas que são as primeiras em adoptar novas tecnologias contra organizações mais conservadoras. Assim, me gostaria de perguntar-lhe ao professor Tse como pode uma empresa superar qualquer barreira e acelerar a adopção de IA. Professor Tse, please. In your opinion, how can a company overcome barriers and speed up the AI adoption in order to stay competitive in the market?
Thank you so much again. So, as I said earlier, one of the keys to success in putting AI into business is by being able to measure the return on investment. So, if you look at the very simple formula, right? Return on investment. The key to success is to make sure that you can measure the return, right? Because the investment, you know how much you are going to pay for the development anyway. So figuring out, having a stronger, more confidence in establishing the return is a critical thing. Another thing that one should need to think about is on the investment side, and that is instead of thinking of investing all your capital money into AI, which results in a huge expenditure. Is there any way you can actually work with your vendors, work with your AI suppliers, and see whether you can actually pay for things over time? In this very case, you can actually use the future benefits you generate from AI in order to pay for the AI services. So, I think that is one of the key things we would recommend to to our clients when it comes to financial considerations. But when it comes to organizational cultural barriers, we have seen a lot of them. The way we would recommend, everyone, every company to at least think about, right, if not even try, is this. Usually, what you will find is that the middle managers, they are the one who are a lot more keen to use AI or for the purpose of at least automation, because they are actually overlooking the processes, the workflows day in, day out. One of the biggest problems, believe it or not, still is that, when it comes to the higher echelon, the higher ranking officers, especially when it comes to the C-suites, they would have a lot more resistance. They would have a lot more hesitations when it comes to using AI. Not least because they're not closers to the actual business processes, but also the fact that a lot of the time what we find is that they are actually they have a less understanding of what AI can and cannot do. So the way we do it, in order to actually overcome this barrier, is to make sure that at the very, very start of identifying AI projects within the business is to invite all the C-suites people, right? Give them a workshop to actually, one, educate them, get them to actually understand better as to what AI is, what it can and cannot do. And two, just as important, basically getting them to actually have their buy-ins so that they would be at least, provide the blessing necessary for the middle managers to actually crack along, get going with implementing AI. It sounds very, backwards. It sounds very like, it's almost like dinosaurs, right? But this is what it is. And we have found that workshops to be a very, very useful way in getting the confidence of the C-suites to to put more faith into any of the AI projects that the lower echelons will be putting in.
Thank you so much, Professor Tse. What about you, Professor Julian? What is your opinion about the difficulties some companies are facing to adopt AI?
It's a great question. So when it comes to removing the barriers of AI and adopting it sooner than later, everything starts with leadership, right? So if your leadership isn't spending time in not educating its staff, not creating exercises to be able to show what's possible, then that's going to be a big barrier. I think the barrier is leadership. You got to have a leader who is using the technology and showing its employees how to use those technologies. And there's different things that can be done. Once a manager or a leader of a company has started to implement those things, they can implement exercises, workshops with their company and with their employees to show them what can be done.
Thanks, Professor Julian. Ahora me gustaría preguntar a la profesora Astrid cuáles son los usos y aplicaciones más comunes en el campo del marketing, que es la especialidad de la profesora. Professor Astrid, based on your understanding of AI applications in marketing, what would be, in your opinion, the typical use and applications of AI in the field of marketing?
Thank you so much for having me. Very interesting area, of course, big growth area in AI. Though it has been extensively used in marketing, specifically in online retailing and in advertising, online content creation, social media. So in online retailing, we see already the use of AI in all sorts of chatbot applications. I'm sure you've chatted with a chatbot, and those are not just automated systems, but also enhanced by AI. And then we have those personalization systems. Those are the ones that recommend products to you or personalize the website to be suited to your particular liking or your device and so on and so forth. So with recommendation systems, they use your past purchase history, your browsing history, your wish list to recommend future products that you may perhaps enjoy based not just on your own purchase history, but also other customers who are similar to you. So AI has also already had those applications. You also see specifically on certain online retailers that the pricing is very dynamic, right? Dynamic pricing. Again, this is influenced by AI based on available stock demand and other factors. So you see specifically, for example, on Amazon, that the prices vary widely. Even within a day, you can see the prices moving around. So there's already this big application in online retailing. And there's another big application with social media and content management and content creation. So you see, for example, a lot of the Google ads and other ad systems such as Bing, they have help for you in terms of keyword research, in terms of analysis of competitors, in terms of content that you should potentially consider creating a blog out of. So there's a SEO research and so on that is assisted with AI that can help marketers better communicate their value to customers. You may also have seen in Hootsuite or other social media platforms that they provide advice on when to best schedule your posts. And again, this is another sort of AI application.
Thank you. And in your opinion, what are the potential challenges of AI application in the field of marketing?
So one of the challenges, of course, is you may have noticed that I was talking about online retailing, online content creation, online advertising, those industries that were generated or adopted the online environment early on have an inherent advantage in terms of the application of AI compared to other industries who may be more traditional, may not have that online exposure, or smaller businesses that don't have that infrastructure. One of the biggest barriers to adopting AI is actually the lack of infrastructure. And this can be hardware, software, human know-how that is able to implement and make the best use of AI. There's some other barriers that are kind of not just marketing specific, but are more widespread, I would say. And that's the issue of data. AI is best performing and learns best, of course, when you have vast trove of high quality data. So it's not just about the amount of data, it's also about the quality of the data and the recency of the data. So feeding in, collecting, developing the systems so that you have them going into your AI to learn is one of the other challenges that many businesses are currently facing. Associated with this data is the concerns regarding privacy. And in certain countries already, there are regulations related to privacy issues with AI. So if I recall correctly, Italy has banned ChatGPT due to privacy concerns. And of course, that's a potential that we need to keep an eye out in terms of regulation, which typically lags technology. So this illustrates some of the risk that companies are exposing themselves to when they are adopting AI. The AI generations of, say, logos, content, and so on are not protectable at the current moment. So the Copyright Office says that a logo generated by AI, well, you can't protect that. An image created by AI is not protected, which means that you can use it, but so can your competitor or anybody else. So that poses challenges in terms of protecting your brand identity and protecting your marketing assets if you're making great use of these AI products. Another concern that is not necessarily a business concern because they're really concerned about legal issues is the ethical concern. Many of these AI systems are trained by scraping data, and some of that data are images by artists or voices by artists and actors, and we're scraping that data to create similar, inspired art, voices, acts, and so on. But those original artists are not getting compensated because individuals and companies are using these AI systems. So there's kind of this long-term concern as to whether AI will end up eroding the creativity because artists are not being compensated for their work. So that is kind of more of a long-term and ethical concern that may not be the most top of mind, perhaps, for many businesses. Also, kind of now diving in a little bit deeper into marketing, some of the content issues that may be relevant is currently Google is watching out for AI content. And that means in terms of SEO, in terms of search engine optimization, content created by AI is penalized. So content created by humans is elevated in terms of search engine optimization. So there's always this advantage in elevating your content by first using some AI, but then adding that personal human touch so that it ranks well on search engines. I'm trying to think of some other challenges. Some other challenges in adopting AI, of course, is the potential lack of connection with customers. AI really excels at the kind of big data, big aspect of it, and less so at developing those personal connections that are so valuable to customers. So that may be another element as to why it's not the most adopted, perhaps, in certain areas of marketing.
Thank you so much, Professor Astrid. Sabemos que o impacto da IA em las carreras profissionais pode variar segundo o tipo de tarefa que o trabalhador necessita realizar. Em alguns trabalhos, por exemplo, a IA pode automatizar a função previamente realizada por el trabalhador, mientras que em outros trabalhos, a IA pode aumentar a produtividade do trabalhador. Me gostaria de perguntar-lhe ao professor Julián, desde uma perspectiva de recursos humanos, como pode gerente de recursos humanos evaluar os puestos de trabalho e planificar os cambios esperados? Professor Julián, how can an HR manager evaluate the job positions and plan for the expected changes?
Hiring is one of my favorite subjects. Steve Jobs talks about this a lot. Hiring is one of the most important skills that you can have as a leader of a company, as a founder. And so how to introduce AI and hiring, I think is beautiful. It makes so much sense to me. So what I love about that is whenever I hire a new candidate or whenever I'm interviewing candidates, we always provide an exercise. Whether that exercise is something written, whether it's something that happens during an interview process, we always do exercises. We want to see how people think. We want to see how people would act in a particular scenario and what kind of skills and knowledge that they can bring. Maybe we're trying to hire and we're realizing that we're looking for someone that we didn't even realize we wanted, right? Giving people opportunities to being able to show what they're really capable is beautiful. So that's hiring across the board. Now, when it comes to AI, just add that in. So when your team is onboarding or you're looking to identify candidates, provide an exercise. This happens a lot with software engineers. Software engineers are given a task and the person is monitoring that task at hand. So that would look like something like a screen share, right? You're sharing a screen, you give a scenario or a task to a candidate and you ask them to use AI, a chatbot, to essentially come back with you and you want to monitor their prompts. I think the big thing in AI right now is prompts. Are you having the most effective types of prompts? What types of prompts are getting you close and closer to the best result that you're looking for? So monitoring that process. We actually haven't even done that yet, but as this gets bigger, that's something I'm going to start implementing as well.
Thanks, Professor Julián. And for you, Professor Terence, what would you recommend to an HR manager?
I believe that AI is in itself is just a technology, is nothing more than a tool. It is essentially a hammer, like a hammer by in itself does not really do anything or doesn't even work, right? In order for the hammer to actually perform its function, its main function, i.e. hitting a nail, you do need a human being to actually use it properly. Not me, I'm not a DIY man, but in the hands of someone who is more skillful than me, the hammer works perfectly well. Same thing applies to AI. In order to get the most benefits out of AI in business, the key is to think through what are the things that you can perform well with the tool, the AI, the algorithm, and what are the things you can actually do well with human beings. So, for instance, if you are if you are using AI for a document reading, okay, what happens if it is a document that is fairly easy for AI to read, right? So that you can use AI to read. However, if there is a document that is not really standard, right? Exceptions. AI, no matter how you trained it, you won't be able to take in a lot of exceptions, or at least not in a cost-effective manner. And therefore, what you should be doing is using humans to make sure that, one, the exceptions are taken care of because AI cannot. And two, humans will be able to teach the AI what we call data annotation to improve its ability so that next time when it sees sort of exceptions, it will be able to actually process it by itself. As I said, the key then is to make sure that you have got humans working alongside the algorithms to make sure that you can reap the full benefits. And that is what people call humans in the loop. And I do strongly believe that human in the loop is one of the most underrated, one of the least understood aspects when it comes to putting AI into business. Yet it is one of the best way to guaranteed return and the benefits you can extract from using AI within a business setting.
Thanks, Professor Tse. Getting back to Professor Julian, what would be your recommendation for an entrepreneur? How can an entrepreneur get involved in this new chapter of the business reality?
When it comes to startups, you're in the building phase. There's so many things that you need to do as a startup to get things right. And with that, there's a lot of thinking that has to go into it. The beautiful thing about AI is it does a lot of the thinking for you. One of my favorite things has been when I'm onboarding a new role or a person to our team, asking the AI ChatGPT, I just ask it, hey, I want to onboard this particular job role within this type of company. Can you give me a rubric on the best way to onboard this person? And it gave us like 10 things on the best way to onboard it. And we literally used that fabric, and we literally used the foundation of how it asked us to do it. And it was perfect. It was absolutely incredible. I've used it to do a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I had it do a SWOT analysis on our business, and then we had a conversation around the weaknesses and the threats. And it was a whole conversation about that. We even talked about it with an investor about what the threats were. I've used it for a sales strategy. I'm like, hey, what are some potential sales strategy to grow a business like this, right? It does a lot of the brain power thinking for you. It doesn't execute, right? So you still need to be able to execute, but it does a lot of the thinking for you. And I think that's what speeds a lot of things up. I can get so much more done in a day when I'm using it. And that's the beauty behind AI and startups.
Excellent, Professor Julian. Sabemos que as empresas que adoptam a IA están haciendo eso por muchas razones, para mejorar la calidad de su producto o servicio, actualizar los procesos existentes, automatizar procesos existentes. Pensando em uma empresa que está dando sus primeiros passos hacia la adopción de la IA, me gustaría preguntar ao professor Ren que recomenda um líder de uma startup. Professor Ren, what would be your recommendation for an entrepreneur, for a startup CEO, to enjoy these new opportunities brought by generative AI?
In terms of advice or suggestions for startups, I would say I have two parts. The first one will be what's the routine or procedure that, in my opinion, a startup should think about. So the first step is to define the market. So as an owner of a startup, I would say they need to think about who they are helping, who they are interacting with, who they are working with. So by looking at this market, they have good understanding about their market share and what's the potential revenue and all the details they're probably going to want to know. And the second stage is once they have their customer or market defined, they should be able to tell what kind of problem they're dealing with. So what kind of problem they are trying to solve, what kind of service they are trying to provide. So with this big question mark in their head, they can further truncate this big problem into small pieces, then they can be able to find solutions to each small chunk or maybe the whole piece. So after they have the brainstorm, say ideas, solutions, they should start work on the real solutions. Then after the solution is done, they should have the, say, prototype or demo. After this demo or prototype is ready, they need to do testing or boosting about this product. It's not really just running it on their server, but also send it to customers and find real feedbacks. So after this time-consuming procedure and also even costly procedure, they will really receive feedback from their customers. Then they can do adjustment and even fix things they find in this procedure. So sometimes they have to go back to step 2. Maybe something is wrong with the problem they defined, or maybe step 3, the solution they designed were not perfect. There are things to be twisted. or fixed. So this is the routine that I suggest.
Thanks, Professor Ren. Pensando neste contexto que estamos discutindo hoje, necessitamos ponernos em la piel del joven gerente, alguém que está começando sua carreira em marketing ou em outra área e se enfrenta à necessidade de adaptar-se à nova geração da inteligência artificial generativa. E vou perguntar isto exatamente à professora Astrid. Professor Astrid, what would you suggest for a manager to get ready for this new era of generative AI?
I was watching a video a few days ago, postulated that the ones most at risk were the ones starting their careers, because the power of AI is in the automation and kind of doing sometimes the simpler things that are often given to younger or newer individuals in the workforce. So to me, the biggest thing I recommend is to experiment with all of these tools. Experiment. Many of these paid tools that are actually incredibly expensive, which is another barrier to adoption, they have free trials. So make use of those free trials to really play around with these systems, see what they can do, see what they cannot do. That is the first thing I recommend. There's also a couple of training, or I wouldn't say training, but good literature provided by Google and Microsoft that is useful to keep on top of, to know about the latest developments, know what they're working on, what is coming up. That's also a really good idea to be on the cutting edge. The third aspect is to know a little bit how these systems work. These systems work best when you have more and more precise prompts. So if you just ask, for example, the free version of ChatGPT, tell me about computers, well, it's not going to be super valuable. So the more precise you can get in your prompts and the questions that you pose to these systems, the better the results you can obtain. So you can specify the sources of material that these systems look into, and even specify the time period, so on and so forth, to get better outputs from these systems. The other aspect is to recognize the weaknesses of these systems. Of course, I'm talking about today. Things may change in the future, but currently these systems are really not that good with creativity. So working on one's creativity, on developing tools for developing creativity is something that is recommended, as well as developing that human connection. Most of these tools are not that great with developing human connections. So developing those soft skills in customer service and dealing with other individuals, I think will be valued by customers in the long term. And the last one is really developing the fundamentals. Really know what marketing theory is about. Really know what your customer base, your target market, your segment, what your brand really is about. Because AI really isn't going to be able to answer that in a forward-looking method. So understanding the fundamentals is also really crucial if, say, an AI system is shut down overnight, for example, for some regulatory purpose, or because it's a startup and poof, it goes away. You need to be able to do those things on your own, even if you're a little slower, even if you're not as efficient as an AI system. It is good for you to have those fundamentals. There's an increased use of applicant tracking systems. They're referred to as ATS systems in hiring processes. And these ATS systems that used to be just kind of rather simple are now being augmented with AI. And learning how those systems work is particularly important so that your resume, your cover letter, and your qualifications are appreciated by those who may be hiring you. This does not mean attempting to game the system. I recently read an article about certain applicants using white font to put in the keywords from the job description, guess what? That doesn't work so well most of the times, because if you don't actually have those attributes and those skills, well, all that it will succeed in doing is showing that you're not the most ethical person, and that is not the way to get hired. So although you want to learn how these systems work, don't try to abuse them, because I don't believe that on the long term it will benefit applicants. So I think that's my advice. Hopefully it's good.
Thanks, Professor Astrid. What about you, Professor Terence? What would be your final recommendation for a young manager or entrepreneur to get ready for AI applications?
The way AI has been developing is that, in business, is you have to actually custom make the AI, the algorithm for each of the business. Any off-the-shelf AI technologies right now has not really got the necessary accuracy needed for business to make it like a cost-effective. Second, off-the-shelf technology is very difficult to be embedded into legacy IT infrastructure. So up to now, it is all about, custom made. However, with the arrival of generative AI, or simply Gen AI, one of the surprising development is that Gen AI is gradually, because of the way it is because of the fact that it is trained on a huge amount of data, it is becoming something called a foundation model, which basically means that, going forward, for any entrepreneurs to be thinking about, entering the IT scene, right? One thing to think about is if Gen AI can actually serve as a big model, right, for a business, right? The fact is this: one, is that custom-made model will be very, very different, in a sense that instead of building a bespoke system for a client, what you will be doing is taking on the Gen AI and then reshaping a little bit of it, right? And therefore, allowing it to create an algorithm to perform a very specific task. This, in the IT, in the AI world, is called prompting. So you can essentially prompt a big foundation model that is already trained for the purpose of completing different tasks. What I think entrepreneurs should actually think about, at the very least, is, think much less about, okay, I am here to actually help companies to build a big model, thinking about what kind of big data they will be needing in order to train a model for them. Instead, I think it will be a very, very beneficial to explore, okay, how can I leverage Gen AI as a foundation model, and what kind of services I can provide when it comes to prompting, fine-tuning the foundation model in order to help business clients to succeed. I think this requires a different understanding of how AI works, and two, it also requires entrepreneurs, people who are thinking of doing a startup, trying to offer new services, thinking about how, what are the new possibilities, what are the new business opportunities out there when it comes to this. And I think, the sales effort will be very different from the traditional bespoke approach to AI. The funding possibilities will also be very, very different. It essentially opens up a very, very different, if not a bigger world of AI possibilities for entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much, Professor Terence. Escenario muy desafiante para el mundo de los negocios y para las carreras. Ciertamente, en los próximos años, algunas profesiones desaparecerán, así como surgirán muchas otras. Y nuestro papel como académicos profesionales que quieren destacarse en el mercado es estar atentos mientras navegamos por estos nuevos mares. Me gustaría una vez más agradecer a los profesores que participaron de nuestro panel de hoy. Y antes de irnos a un breve descanso, me gustaría invitar una vez más a participar de nuestro Management Challenge. Acede al enlace en la descripción para conocer la regulación, reunir a tu grupo y presentar su proyecto para el uso de inteligencia artificial en los negocios. Volvemos en breve con nuestra sesión de preguntas y respuestas.
Olá, estamos de vuelta para la sesión de preguntas y respuestas del tercer y último panel de discusión de la Global Management Week 2023. El primer día discutimos las perspectivas actuales de la globalización. Ayer hablamos sobre el cambio climático y hoy estamos tratando de entender cuáles son los impactos potenciales de la nueva generación de inteligencia artificial en los negocios. En fin, 3 temas complejos e importantes para los que tuvimos la suerte de contar con el apoyo de grandes expertos para poder tratarlos acá con nosotros. Os doy las gracias una vez más por la presencia de los keynote speakers de hoy y especialmente le agradezco vuestra participación, vosotros que nos seguís a través de nuestro canal de YouTube. Comenzaré respondiendo algunas preguntas enviadas por adelantado y luego las que enviaron ahora a través del chat. ¿De acuerdo? La primera duda viene de Colombia y el señor Jorge Enrique Parra Pérez pregunta: ¿cómo podemos controlar el uso de la inteligencia artificial para impedir que la misma se convierta en una arma de destrucción humana? En la misma línea de pensamiento, el señor Carlos Sebastián Duarte Brites cuestiona: ¿es posible que la IA pueda tomar el lugar de una persona reemplazándola en el ámbito laboral? Bueno, elegí estas 2 preguntas para abrir nuestra sesión de preguntas y respuestas por una razón muy específica. Es común que las discusiones sobre tecnologías emergentes inciten a la preocupación de que las máquinas reemplazarán a los trabajadores, que las máquinas aumentarán el desempleo o incluso dañarán a las personas. Bueno, eso no es cierto. Lo que sucede es exactamente lo contrario. Cuando se crea una nueva tecnología, aumentando la productividad del trabajo, se produce más riqueza, se produce más consumo que es promovido. Hoy en día, las personas consumen muchos más productos y servicios que hace 30 o 50 años. Mucho más productos y servicios que hace 100 o 200 años. Este aumento en el consumo ha llevado a un aumento en los ingresos de los trabajadores en todo el mundo, una mejora en la calidad de vida, un aumento en la esperanza de vida. Las nuevas tecnologías proporcionan esto. El trabajo se vuelve más productivo, menos personas pueden hacer un volumen mayor de tareas, liberando a más trabajadores para realizar nuevas funciones. Por supuesto, la persona que ejerció una función y fue reemplazada debido a una nueva tecnología, tendrá que reposicionarse en el mercado laboral. Esta persona individualmente tendrá en ese momento la sensación de que era malo que hubiera surgido una nueva tecnología. Pero en el proceso de recualificación profesional surgirán nuevas oportunidades laborales. Y en el conjunto de la sociedad, las perspectivas son siempre mejores em regiões com avanços tecnológicos que em regiões tecnologicamente atrasadas. Por supuesto, a distribuição do ingresso no mundo é mala, sabemos disso. Há muita desigualdade social, também sabemos disso. Pero este é um problema que tem origens em la política, não em la tecnologia. Criar oportunidades para todos e redistribuir o ingresso é uma função do Estado. E sempre devemos pressionar para a criação de políticas de inclusão social, pero isso não significa ir contra os avanços tecnológicos, ok? Poderia explicar-me assim? Muito bem. Sigamos adelante porque temos muitas perguntas acá e pouco tempo para isso. Sara Carillo, de Perú, pergunta: ¿cuáles son los principales retos que tiene el liderazgo en un entorno de trabajo cada vez más híbrido? Una pregunta similar a esa viene también de Perú, cuando el señor Jaime Alejandro Salazar Pando hace la siguiente cuestión. En el inevitable uso masivo de las inteligencias artificiales, ¿cuáles son las habilidades e aptitudes que necessitamos desenvolver para poder convertir-nos em líderes exitosos de uma empresa? Bueno, para começar a responder a esta pergunta, necessito recordar a todos que as empresas estão agora, neste mesmo momento, integrando suas funções com a inteligência artificial. A IA está começando a entender-se em seu potencial para impulsar resultados para as organizações. Assim, os equipos implicados neste despliegue são equipos multifuncionais, enfocados em fazer o nexo de união entre as novas tecnologias e os viejos processos da empresa. Dicho esto, as habilidades clave necessárias para que os gerentes tenham êxito no uso de ferramentas da inteligência artificial nas empresas estão associadas, em primeiro lugar, com a capacidade de liderar equipos multifuncionais, equipos que funcionam pessoas de diferentes áreas e origens. Em segundo lugar, isto implica a capacidade de explotar as funcionalidades da IA, tendo em conta que estas funcionalidades aún são pouco conhecidas e a maioria dos possíveis usos de IA aún não se han descoberto. Não estamos falando, então, de alguém especializado em IA, sino de alguém muito familiarizado com as possíveis aplicações desta nova tecnologia e, a la vez, familiarizado com os processos da empresa. E o terceiro e último elemento que me gostaria de trazer aqui a esta resposta é a capacidade de gestionar o cambio, considerando que a menudo os cambios culturais são muito mais difíceis de implementar que os cambios tecnológicos em si mesmos. Muito bem. Adelante. La señorita Carla de la Garza pregunta a nosotros: ¿cuáles son los principales desafíos que enfrentan los profesionales en la actualidad debido a la convergencia de la inteligencia artificial en sus campos laborales? Y de forma similar, Luis Triminio de Honduras pregunta también: ¿cuáles creen que son los impactos más grandes que se esperan con toda esta implementação da inteligência artificial em las empresas? Todavia, vamos a averiguar que tarefas se verão mais afetadas por la inteligência artificial em las empresas. Pero vale a pena comentar aqui que há algo profundamente diferente em la revolução provocada por la inteligência artificial generativa em comparação com os desenvolvimentos tecnológicos anteriores. Mientras que as inovações tecnológicas anteriores han reemplazado, em sua maioria, as tarefas rutinárias e repetitivas, a IA generativa tem a característica de ser útil em atividades não rutinárias, em atividades associadas com a criação. E isto é um cambio sobre todo o que estávamos acostumbrados a ver. A produtividade dos sectores de criação de texto, de análise de dados, de produção de imagens, de elaboração de diagnósticos, coisas que as máquinas pareciam estar lejos de poder aportar de una manera más intensa fueron las más directamente logradas por la aparición de la IA generativa. Las empresas tendrán la oportunidad de aumentar su productividad con IA, asignando personas en nuevas áreas y fortaleciendo los procesos de empoderamiento de los colaboradores más afectados. Ok, adelante. Joaquín Jarín de Ecuador envía una cuestión interesante también. ¿Cuál es el papel de la inteligencia artificial en la formación de nuevas empresas y servicios corporativos? Muy bien, estamos viendo la aparición de numerosas empresas proveedoras de servicios que utilizan inteligencia artificial de esta nueva generación, inteligencia artificial generativa. Aunque esto es todavía demasiado reciente para que podamos evidenciar una tendencia, hay algunos sectores que están destacando al menos por ser los primeros en beneficiarse de las capacidades generativas de la inteligencia artificial. Te daré, Joaquín, algunos ejemplos, pero estoy seguro que habrá muchas industrias nuevas con excelentes aplicaciones de la IA y algunos de estos nuevos sectores podremos tener la oportunidad de conocerlos en nuestro concurso de proyectos de IA, cuyas inscripciones se extenderán hasta el 6 de octubre. Y los mejores proyectos compartirán casi $200,000 en becas. Bueno, la primera aplicación que creo que vale la pena mencionar es en el área de análisis de datos, especialmente datos no estructurados. La IA puede analizar grandes conjuntos de datos en tiempo real y proporcionar información valiosa para la toma de decisiones empresariales. Esto ayuda a las empresas a tomar decisiones más informadas, estratégicas, y el uso de IA en este caso puede ser con la adquisición de herramientas de IA por parte de la empresa o mediante la prestación de servicios por parte de una empresa de consultoría y de investigación. Y voy a llegar a esto en la pregunta del señor Nicolás en algunos minutos. La IA permite personalizar los productos y también los servicios para satisfacer las necesidades individuales de los clientes que previamente tenían que estar satisfechos con un producto o un servicio estandarizado. Esto es especialmente importante en sectores como el comercio electrónico, la publicidad, donde la personalización puede aumentar la retención, la satisfacción de los clientes y, consecuentemente, aumentar las ventas. Esta personalización puede llegar hasta la atención telefónica directa. Los chatbots y asistentes virtuales impulsados por IA pueden proporcionar soporte al cliente las 24 horas del día, los 7 días de la semana, lo que mejora la satisfacción del cliente y reduce en mucho los costos operativos. Hemos visto numerosos ejemplos en el cuidado de la salud, con IA ayudando en el diagnóstico preliminar de pruebas clínicas y de imagen, acelerando y perfeccionando el trabajo del médico. Pero yo tengo curiosidad por ver los proyectos que se presentarán en nuestra competencia, que yo creo que habrá muchas más aplicaciones de las que podemos imaginar hoy. Y ahora intentaremos responder las preguntas enviadas en el chat. El tiempo es muy corto, estoy en los últimos minutos acá, pero vamos a ver lo que pasa. Perla Rodríguez, que nos dice de qué país es, se puede decir en el chat, ficaré contento, Perla. ¿Cómo repercute la IA en el diseño curricular de las carreras profesionales? ¿Cuáles profesiones que se consideran que serán más productivas con la IA? Muy bien, Perla. Las universidades están en este momento, ahorita mismo, cambiando sus currículos, sus contenidos de las clases, los maestros están haciendo el mismo. Este mismo debate solo fue posible por la unificación, por la cooperación de muchas universidades de todo el mundo para promover una discusión actual sobre este tema. No hace sentido preparar un alumno con un conjunto de informaciones que no son suficientes para que él pueda desarrollar su trabajo de forma positiva en la sociedad, en las empresas. Entonces, lo que se espera es que cada programa universitario, cada programa profesional, particularmente os de gestión, sean cada vez más impulsados por ideas de la inteligencia artificial para que el pensamiento de marketing, de finanzas, de recursos humanos, de estrategia, de análisis de datos, de análisis da economia, de la sociedad, sea más productiva con el uso de inteligencia artificial. Yo sé que muchas instituciones de enseñanza están hoy preocupadas en frenar el uso de inteligencia artificial en las clases. Nosotros somos del otro time, estamos buscando aprofundizar el uso de inteligencia artificial en nuestras salas de clases y ayudar a los alumnos a comprender mejor cuáles son los potenciales usos de esto en sus carreras profesionales. Ok, Perla, muchas gracias por su participación. Llegué acá en la pregunta que mencioné durante la parte anterior, el señor Nicholas Layton, que también nos dice de qué país es. Un gusto hablar con usted. Oh, no. Saludos desde Chile, Nicholas Layton de Chile, mucho gusto hablar con usted. ¿Cuáles cree que serían los factores para considerar en una empresa para decidir si adquirir una IA? Para decidir si adquirir una IA por completo y capacitar a su propio personal o asesorarse con una consultora. Dos factores fundamentalmente. La intensidad de uso. Si va a usar poco, no hace mucho sentido desarrollar internamente, contratar personas, etc. Si va a usar mucho, puede ser una ventaja tenerla dentro de casa. Y la segunda es la necesidad de adecuación de las herramientas existentes a su necesidad particular. Se tiene que usar una herramienta muy específica, muy detallada y en constante evolución. Probablemente será mejor que usted tenga su propia herramienta, su propio time, su propio equipo trabajando dentro de su organización. ¿Ok? Bueno, y sin tiempo para más nada, quiero una vez más agradecer por su participación. Tenemos el nombre, el país de la señorita Perla. Perla de México. Un gusto hablar con usted. Quero uma vez mais agradecer a participação de todos em la Global Management Week 2023. Ha sido um prazer e um honor para mim ser anfitrião deste debate com tantas pessoas fuertes em suas áreas de especialização cooperando acá com nós. Não olvides de firmar a lista de presença para que pueda receber seu certificado e espero que essas discussões les hayan abierto los ojos para nuevas oportunidades. Y espero que en un futuro encontrarte en uno de nuestros programas en Estados Unidos, en Europa o acá en Brasil. Póngase en contacto con nosotros, tenga un lindo día, buenos estudios y hasta pronto.